My wife threw me out after a $33 million deal. 3 days later, my name was on every page. Why did she throw her husband away immediately after a $33 million deal? How did his name suddenly appear on every page only 3 days later? Hello, everyone, and welcome to KFIVE Stories, where ambition, betrayal, and hidden truths can change everything overnight. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another gripping story. Thank you for every view, thoughtful comment, and moment you spend watching with us. Your support allows this community to keep growing and sharing powerful stories with viewers everywhere. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there right now. We are always grateful to hear from our global audience. Now, settle in, stay attentive, and let us step into the opening scene of today's unforgettable story. Read the footer, I said. Lauren looked at me like she hadn't heard correctly. The conference room on the 42nd floor was wrapped in glass, steel, and the pale blue light of a Chicago morning. Below us, traffic moved in thin lines between the buildings. Inside, no one moved at all. 12 members of Crestline Cybersecurity's board sat around a black walnut table polished so perfectly it reflected their faces. Lawyers occupied one side. Investment bankers filled the other. At the far end, Grant Whitmore stood with both hands resting on the back of his chair, wearing the same confident smile I had seen in my living room 3 nights earlier. That smile disappeared when Lauren turned the first page. Her finger stopped at the bottom. Daniel Mercer. My name was printed beneath the ownership certification in small black letters. She glanced up at me, then back at the document. That doesn't mean anything, Grant said quickly. Daniel may have been included as an outside consultant. I didn't answer him. Lauren turned another page. Daniel Mercer. Then another. Daniel Mercer, authorized representative of Mercer Strategic Holdings. The soft scrape of paper against paper became the loudest sound in the room. 3 days earlier, Lauren had thrown my suitcase down the front steps of the house we had shared for 11 years. Now she sat less than 20 feet from me, discovering that the deal she believed would change her life had my name written through it like a signature beneath wet paint. Page 4. Page 5. Patent assignment. Licensing authority. Transfer approval. Voting consent. Each time she found my name, her breathing changed a little more. Grant stepped toward the table. There's obviously been a clerical misunderstanding. I leaned back in my chair. Then why? I asked. Is the misunderstanding on every page? No one laughed. The chairman removed his glasses and folded them carefully beside his water glass. Evelyn Price, my attorney, sat to my right with 3 gray binders stacked in front of her. She had not spoken since Lauren entered the room. She didn't need to. The binders said enough. Lauren finally looked at me. Her face had lost the sharp confidence she wore at work, the expression that made people believe she always knew more than they did. That morning, she knew almost nothing. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. It was the first question she had asked me in months that sounded honest. I looked at the woman I had once stayed awake beside, building presentation slides for interviews she was too nervous to attend. The woman whose first executive suit I had paid for when our checking account barely covered rent. The woman who once told me she wanted a marriage where neither of us had to become smaller for the other to feel important. Somewhere along the way, she had forgotten saying that. Or maybe she had only meant it when she was the smaller one. Grant cleared his throat. This meeting is about Crestline's $33 million acquisition. It is not the place for a domestic dispute. Evelyn opened the first binder. The sound was soft. Grant went silent anyway. This is not a domestic dispute, she said. It is an ownership hearing. Lauren's eyes moved from Evelyn to me. Outside the windows, sunlight climbed across the neighboring towers. Inside the room, the air felt colder with every second. I reached for the copy of the agreement in front of me and placed one hand over the cover. Lauren had called it her deal. Grant had called it his legacy. The press release called it Crestline's boldest acquisition in a decade. They were all wrong. I looked at Lauren and remembered the champagne in our kitchen, the laughter of her colleagues, and the sound of my suitcase striking the stone steps. Then I remembered her final words before she closed the door. "You don't belong in the life I'm building." I slid the agreement toward her. "3 nights ago," I said, "you told me I didn't belong in your future." Her hand trembled against the final page. I kept my voice calm. "Today, you're going to learn who built it." 72 hours earlier, my wife raised a champagne glass and announced that she had finally outgrown me. The house was brighter than usual that night. Every downstairs light was on. Music drifted through the speakers, and strangers in expensive suits stood around our kitchen island drinking from bottles I had been saving for our anniversary. Lauren had texted me at 4. Big news. Come home early. Try to look presentable. I arrived at 7 carrying takeout from the Italian place she used to love. By then, Grant Whitmore had already taken my seat at the head of the dining table. He wore a navy suit, and the kind of watch men angle toward the light. 2 vice presidents from Crestline stood beside him, laughing too hard at something he had said. Lauren moved between them in a fitted white dress, glowing with the sharp, restless energy she carried whenever power was close enough to touch. She kissed my cheek without looking at me. You made it. I live here, I said. She smiled as though I had made a harmless joke. Grant lifted his glass. Daniel, good timing. Your wife just helped close the biggest deal in Crestline history. A presentation glowed on the television behind him. $33 million. The number filled the screen in gold lettering beneath the Crestline logo. Below it was the name of the company they planned to acquire, Northstar Data Systems. I stopped walking. Lauren noticed. For half a second, something nervous passed through her expression. Then she covered it with a smile. Well, she asked, aren't you going to congratulate me? I set the food on the counter. Has the transfer been approved? The room quieted slightly. Grant chuckled. Always the cautious one. I looked at the slide again. The valuation was too clean. The projected licensing income was wrong. More importantly, the ownership line at the bottom listed Crestline as the sole acquiring authority. That was impossible. Who prepared these figures? I asked. Lauren's smile tightened. My team. Did your team review the patent schedule? Grant took a slow sip of champagne. We have lawyers for that. So do the patent holders. The vice presidents exchanged a look. Lauren placed her glass down harder than necessary. Daniel, not tonight. I should have let it go. For years, that had been my role. Smooth the room. Lower my voice. Let Lauren have the applause. I had told myself it was support, but support and disappearance can look dangerously similar after enough time. I walked closer to the television. In the bottom corner of the final slide was a small gray logo. Mercer Strategic Holdings. My father's initials were hidden inside the crest, just as they had been since the trust was formed 14 years earlier. Lauren had looked at that slide for weeks. She had never asked what the name meant. Before anyone signs tomorrow, I said, you need to read the underlying agreement. Her face changed. Not fear. Embarrassment. She glanced toward Grant, then toward the executives watching us. This is exactly what you do, she said. You walk into something you don't understand and act like everyone else missed something. I understand more than you think. Grant smiled into his glass. Lauren saw it, and instead of stopping, she pushed harder. You couldn't just be happy for me, could you? That isn't what this is. It's always what this is. Every promotion, every event, every time people finally see what I'm capable of, you find a way to make it about your concerns. The music kept playing softly behind her. A piano melody stretched through the silence like it had wandered into the wrong house. I lowered my voice. Lauren, check the footer. She laughed once. It wasn't a happy sound. You work from the den in sweatpants, Daniel. You haven't held a real position in years. Please stop pretending you belong in this conversation. No one spoke. Grant looked down, but I could see satisfaction at the corner of his mouth. I felt the key ring in my pocket press against my palm. Lauren stepped closer. This deal is my future, she said. And I am done letting your lack of ambition make me feel guilty for having one. I looked at the woman I had married and waited for her to soften. She didn't. She walked upstairs. When she returned, she was carrying my suitcase. She opened the front door and dropped it onto the stone steps. If you can't support the life I'm building, she said, then you don't belong in it. I removed the house key from my ring and placed it on the table. Then I looked once more at the gray logo glowing on the screen. Read the agreement before morning, I said. Lauren folded her arms. I walked past her into the cold. Behind me, the door closed. 30 seconds later, the music started again. Lauren had not always been embarrassed by me. There was a time when she called me from the parking lot before every interview because her hands shook too badly to hold the steering wheel. She would sit in her old silver Honda with the engine running, whispering that everyone inside was smarter, sharper, more qualified. I would tell her to breathe. Then I would remind her of every problem she had solved, every late night she had survived, every reason she belonged in the room. She usually went in after that, and she usually got the job. When we first met, Lauren was 26 and working as a junior account coordinator for a software distributor that treated unpaid overtime like a personality test. I was 30, already 6 years into building security systems for financial networks. My shirts were cheap, my apartment was smaller than hers, and I drove a truck with a passenger door that only opened from the inside. She liked that I never tried to impress her. At least, that was what she said then. Our first dates were diner coffee and long walks through downtown after everything had closed. She asked questions about encryption, patents, venture capital, and why so many brilliant engineers lost control of the companies they created. I answered every one, sometimes on napkins, sometimes on the back of receipts. Once, on the paper wrapper from a sandwich she never finished. She used to look at me like my mind was a place she wanted to explore. Years later, she stopped asking questions. The change did not arrive like a storm. It came quietly, the way cold air slips beneath a door. First, she stopped showing me her presentations. Then she stopped telling me when she had important meetings. At company events, she introduced me as Daniel, my husband. He does consulting. The words were technically true. That made them worse. I had stepped away from public leadership after 14 years of 70-hour weeks, red-eye flights, investor dinners, and one collapse in an airport lounge that left me staring at a hospital ceiling with wires taped to my chest. Lauren had been there when the doctor said stress was no longer an abstract warning. She held my hand. She cried. She told me no company was worth losing me. So I changed my life. I moved my work into the den. I stopped attending conferences. I let other people take the stage. I cooked dinner when Lauren worked late and reviewed contracts after she fell asleep. I thought I was protecting our marriage. She thought I had lost my edge. The first joke came at a holiday party. One of her coworkers asked what I did all day. Before I could answer, Lauren smiled and said, "Daniel is semi-retired from being ambitious." Everyone laughed. I did too. That is how disrespect enters a marriage. Not through the front door. Through small jokes you pretend do not hurt. After that, the stories changed. I became the husband who worked from home. The husband who handled groceries. The husband who had made some money years ago. Lauren became the rising executive with the quiet man standing 3 steps behind her. I let it happen because I knew the truth. Or I thought knowing it was enough. I knew the house had been purchased through an entity I controlled. I knew the trust paid the property taxes. I knew 3 of Crestline's most valuable products depended on patents I had written before Grant Whitmore had ever heard the word cybersecurity. But I never wanted Lauren's respect to come from a balance sheet. I wanted her to remember the man who stayed awake until 2 in the morning helping her prepare for interviews. The man who believed in her before the titles did. The man who never asked her to become smaller. Sitting alone in my truck outside the hotel that night, I finally understood something I had avoided for years. Lauren had not outgrown me. She had outgrown the version of me she could see. And the saddest part was not that she had forgotten what I built. It was that she had stopped wondering who I was. The company that made the $33 million deal possible began with a stolen folding table and a space heater that barely worked. Not stolen in the criminal sense. Borrowed from my father's garage and never returned. I was 29, broke enough to calculate groceries by the ounce, and working out of a rented workshop behind an auto body shop on the south side of Chicago. The ceiling leaked. The windows rattled whenever freight trains passed. In January, the cold pushed through the walls so hard I could see my breath above the keyboard. That was where I built Sentinel. At the time, financial institutions were moving faster than their security systems could protect them. Banks stored customer data in structures designed years earlier. Software companies patched weaknesses after attacks instead of preventing them. I believed the system could recognize danger before the breach happened. For 18 months, I lived on coffee, canned soup, and 3 hours of sleep. I wrote code until letters blurred on the screen. I tested failures no customer would ever see. Every time the framework collapsed, I started again. Lauren was there during those years. She brought sandwiches to the workshop and complained about the smell of solder. She sat on the floor beside me while I explained predictive threat mapping with bolts, washers, and paper cups. The night the first full test succeeded, she climbed onto that folding table and danced beneath a flickering fluorescent light. You built something nobody else has, she said. I believed she understood what that meant. Sentinel did not become valuable overnight. First came rejection. Investors called it too technical. Executives said companies would never pay to prevent disasters that had not happened yet. One man looked through my presentation, closed the folder, and told me engineers should leave business to businessmen. 6 months later, his firm suffered a breach that cost more than my entire funding request. He called me the next morning. That contract led to another, then 3 more. Soon, Sentinel protected regional banks, insurance networks, and medical databases across 5 states. Money arrived. So did people who wanted control. Some offered partnerships. Others offered acquisition deals designed to turn me into an employee inside the company I had created. I learned quickly that contracts could steal more cleanly than thieves. My father understood that before I did. He had spent 40 years repairing engines and trusting handshakes. One bad partnership nearly cost him the garage. A week before he died, he sat beside me at his kitchen table with an oxygen tube beneath his nose and a contract spread between us. He tapped the bottom of each page. Don't stare at the number on the front, he said. Read the name that carries the risk. After the funeral, I rebuilt the company structure. The operating business could grow, hire employees, sign clients, and attract investors. But the patents were transferred into Mercer Strategic Holdings. The voting rights went into the Mercer Family Trust. No executive could sell the technology, transfer the license, or change ownership without written approval from the trust's controlling representative. Me. It was not a secret. It was simply buried beneath language most people were too impatient to read. Years later, when my health failed, I stepped away from daily management. I sold portions of the operating company and allowed a new leadership team to take over. My name disappeared from conference stages and press releases, but it never disappeared from the foundation. Northstar Data Systems was built on a later version of Sentinel. Crestline could buy Northstar's employees, offices, client contracts, and equipment. They could not buy the technology without me. That was why my name appeared beneath every critical section of the acquisition agreement. Licensor, patent holder, voting controller, final approving authority. The deal Lauren called her future had crossed my desk 6 weeks earlier. I had approved it in principle because Northstar employed 280 people, and without a buyer, the company would collapse before the end of the quarter. I had not told Lauren. Not because I was testing her. Not because I wanted to surprise her. I kept waiting for her to mention the company name, the trust, or the logo she had seen on every draft. I wanted her to ask one simple question. Daniel, do you know these people? She never did. By the time she threw me out, she had spent months studying the largest deal of her career. She had read the valuation. She had memorized the projections. She had practiced the announcement until every pause sounded confident. But she had never read the footer. And in business, as in marriage, the smallest ignored detail is often the one holding everything together. The first sign that the deal was rotten was not the money. It was the silence around the layoffs. At 12:43 that night, I sat on the edge of a hotel bed with my suitcase still unopened when Evelyn Price called. Rain pressed against the window in thin silver lines. The room smelled like carpet cleaner and stale air conditioning. Daniel, she said, we have a problem. Evelyn never used that word casually. I opened my laptop. A secure folder appeared in my inbox. Inside were revised projections, board presentations, employee transition plans, and an executive compensation schedule that had not been included in the draft I approved 6 weeks earlier. At first, the changes looked small. Different wording, adjusted dates. A few numbers moved between columns. That is how fraud usually enters a contract. Not with a gunshot. With a comma. I opened the workforce transition plan. 280 Northstar employees had been promised protection for 12 months. That condition was one of the reasons I agreed to consider the sale. The revised document reduced it to 30 days. After that, 117 positions would be eliminated. Engineers, support staff, security analysts, people whose names would never appear in the press release. Their salaries had been converted into post-acquisition efficiencies. I read the phrase twice. Then I opened the executive compensation page. Grant Whitmore would receive a $4 million performance bonus when the transaction closed. Lauren's promotion was listed directly beneath it. Vice President of Strategic Integration. A salary increase. Stock options. A corner office. The title she had been celebrating in our kitchen while my suitcase waited upstairs. None of that surprised me as much as the next document. It was a presentation Lauren had signed. The first slide identified Crestline as the exclusive owner of the Sentinel architecture upon closing. That was false. The second credited Grant with discovering and developing the North Star opportunity. Also false. The third described Lauren as the primary architect of the acquisition. Incomplete, at best. I kept reading. At the bottom of page 17, beneath a paragraph about ownership risk, Lauren had signed a certification stating that all controlling interests had been fully disclosed to the board. My name was absent. Mercer Strategic Holdings was absent. The trust was absent. I stared at her signature until the letters stopped looking familiar. Did she know? I asked. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. She received the original disclosure package. That was not an answer. Did she read it? We can prove she opened the file. The room seemed to shrink. I remembered Lauren at our dining table months earlier, laptop open, asking me to pour more wine while she reviewed boring legal material. I remembered seeing the Mercer crest on her screen. I remembered almost mentioning it. But I had wanted her to ask. Now I understood that she had seen the warning and moved past it. Maybe Grant told her it was irrelevant. Maybe she convinced herself the lawyers would handle it. Maybe the promotion had been close enough to touch that every inconvenient detail became someone else's problem. It did not matter. She had signed. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. I closed the presentation and opened the internal emails. Grant wrote about controlling the narrative. He instructed his team to remove references to third-party patent authority from employee communications. In one message, he called the North Star engineers temporary baggage. Lauren replied 12 minutes later. Understood. I'll keep the announcement focused on growth. 5 words. No objection. No question. No concern for the people being reduced to a number. That was when the betrayal changed shape. Until then, I had thought Lauren had only stopped respecting me. Painful, but personal. Now I saw something colder. She had become willing to ignore the truth as long as the lie carried her name upward. I could have killed the deal before sunrise. One call. One revoked authorization. $33 million frozen before the banks opened. Grant would fall. Lauren would fall with him. But so would North Star. Payroll was already strained. Their lenders had extended the deadline twice. If Crestline walked away, 280 families would wake up inside a company with weeks left to survive. I looked at the layoffs again, then at Grant's bonus, then at Lauren's signature. My anger wanted destruction. My conscience wanted precision. Do not cancel the transaction, I told Evelyn. She paused. What do you want me to do? I watched rain crawl down the glass. Lock the patents. Preserve every email. Call an emergency board meeting. And the acquisition? We saved the company. I closed the laptop. But we removed the people poisoning it. For 3 days, I let Lauren believe she had won. She stayed in our house. I stayed in a hotel room overlooking a parking garage, wearing the same 2 shirts and drinking coffee from paper cups that softened around the rim. Every morning, her name appeared on my phone. First came anger. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Then came justification. I was emotional. You pushed me. By the second night, the messages changed. Where are you? We need to discuss the house. Grant says the closing is being delayed. I answered none of them. Silence is not weakness when it has a purpose. While Lauren posted photographs from the celebration, Evelyn and I dismantled Grant's plan one document at a time. At 6 o'clock each morning, we opened a secure video call with forensic accountants, patent attorneys, and 2 independent members of Crestline's board. We froze the transfer authority on Sentinel. We copied every internal email. We compared the original employee protections with the revised version Grant intended to use after closing. Every lie left a shadow. Every shadow led to another file. By the second afternoon, we had enough evidence to remove him. But removing Grant was the easy part. Saving North Star was harder. Its employees needed payroll. Its clients needed uninterrupted protection. If I simply revoked the license, hospitals, banks, and insurance networks would lose access to systems they depended on. Revenge could be immediate. Responsibility required patience. So we built a second path. The acquisition would continue, but Grant's bonus would be suspended. The layoffs would be blocked. An interim leadership team would take control before the money moved. Every employee would receive 12 months of protection, and the engineers who created North Star's value would receive equity in the combined company. At 4:17 on the third afternoon, someone knocked on my hotel door. 3 hard strikes. Not housekeeping. I looked through the peephole. Grant Whitmore stood in the hallway wearing a charcoal coat and an expression that had negotiated weaker men into surrender. I opened the door but did not invite him inside. He glanced past me at the unmade bed and the takeout containers. So this is where the mysterious Daniel Mercer hides. You found me. He smiled. It was not difficult. That must be a new experience for you. His smile thinned. Grant stepped closer and lowered his voice. Let us stop pretending this is about employee protections. You are angry because your wife threw you out. The words landed where he intended. I gave him nothing. He removed an envelope from inside his coat. $2 million, he said. You sign the approval, withdraw the board request, and disappear back into retirement. I looked at the envelope. You revised the patent disclosures. Our lawyers revised them. You cut the employment guarantee. Business conditions changed. You concealed your bonus. His jaw tightened. My compensation is irrelevant. It is $4 million. That makes it relevant. For the first time, the confidence in his face cracked. He put the envelope away. Lauren signed the certifications, he said. If this becomes an investigation, she will be the one answering questions. Not me. There it was. The final shape of the man. When money failed, he reached for threats. When threats failed, he offered my wife as a shield. You promised her a promotion, I said. She wanted one. You told her the trust had no authority. She chose to believe me. That hurt because it was probably true. Grant studied my face, searching for the wound he could press. Do not destroy a $33 million transaction over a broken marriage. I stepped into the hallway and pulled the door closed behind me. You spent 6 months building a deal around my patents, my approval, and my name, I said. But you never spent 6 minutes learning who I was. His cheeks darkened. What do you want? You already asked. How much? I shook my head. This is always where men like you make the mistake. You think every person is just a number waiting to be negotiated. His phone vibrated. He checked the screen. Emergency board session confirmed. The color left his face. I adjusted the cuff of my shirt. I do not want your money, Grant. The elevator doors opened behind him. I stepped inside and met his eyes as the doors began to close. I want the chair you are sitting in. Lauren entered the boardroom expecting a promotion. She found her husband sitting at the head of the table. For 1 second, she remained in the doorway, one hand still wrapped around the silver handle. Grant stood behind her, close enough to whisper something I could not hear. Whatever he said made her straighten her shoulders. She walked in. The confidence returned to her face, but not to her eyes. 12 board members watched as she took the chair across from me. Evelyn sat at my right with 3 gray binders. Grant remained standing. This is highly irregular, he said. Daniel Mercer has no official position at Crestline. The chairman looked toward me. Mr. Mercer, he said, would you like to respond? I slid a copy of the acquisition agreement across the table. Page 1. Lauren did not touch it. Grant laughed softly. We have all reviewed the agreement. No, I said. You reviewed the number on the cover. The room went still. Lauren finally opened the document. Her finger moved down the page until it reached the footer. Daniel Mercer. She looked up. I said nothing. She turned to page 2. My name appeared beneath the licensing certification. Page 3 listed Mercer Strategic Holdings as the controlling patent authority. Page 4 identified the Mercer Family Trust as the holder of special voting rights. By page 5, Lauren's breathing had changed. This cannot be right, she whispered. Grant leaned over her shoulder. It is a legacy disclosure. It has no effect on operational control. Evelyn opened the first binder. Actually, she said, it has complete effect. She distributed a document to each board member. The chairman read the first paragraph, then removed his glasses. Evelyn continued. Northstar Data Systems owns its offices, contracts, hardware, and customer relationships. It does not own the Sentinel architecture on which its primary products operate. Grant's jaw tightened. The technology is licensed, Evelyn said. The license cannot be transferred without written authorization from the patent holder. She turned one page. The patent holder is Daniel Mercer. No one moved. Lauren stared at me as if the person sitting across from her had replaced the man she threw out 3 nights earlier. You created Sentinel? She asked. The question was almost too quiet to hear. Yes. Grant pushed his chair back. This is theater. Daniel stepped away years ago. He has no management authority. Evelyn opened the second binder. Management authority is not the issue. Voting control is. She placed a certificate in front of the chairman. The Mercer Family Trust holds the special class of shares required to approve any sale involving Sentinel intellectual property. The chairman looked at me. And Mr. Mercer controls the trust? He does. Grant's hand closed around the back of his chair. I watched him calculate. Without my approval, the transaction stopped. Without Sentinel, Northstar's value collapsed. Without Northstar, Grant's $4 million bonus disappeared. Lauren looked down at the signature page she had signed. I was told the trust was passive. By whom? I asked. Her eyes moved toward Grant. That single glance answered more than any confession. Evelyn opened the third binder. This contains the original disclosures, the revised disclosures, internal communications concerning the removal of Mercer Strategic Holdings, and the workforce plan reducing employee protection from 12 months to 30 days. Folders were passed around the table. Grant's face hardened. These documents were prepared by multiple departments. Under your instructions, Evelyn said. She displayed an email on the wall screen. Control the narrative. Remove third-party ownership references from all employee materials. Grant Whitmore. The next email appeared. 117 positions marked for elimination. Then the bonus schedule. For $1 million payable to Grant upon closing. Lauren's promotion sat directly beneath it. She closed her eyes. The chairman turned toward Grant. Did you disclose this compensation arrangement to the full board? Grant did not answer. I looked at Lauren. You said this deal had your name all over it. Her lips parted, but no words came. I tapped the agreement between us. No, Lauren. The paper sounded like a gavel beneath my finger. It has mine. Grant stepped forward. You cannot destroy this company because of a marital dispute. I stood slowly. This is not about my marriage. I looked around the table at the faces of people who finally understood who held the final signature. It is about fraud, hidden layoffs, and a man who believed employees were disposable. Then I turned back to Lauren. You were right about one thing. Her eyes filled. After this deal, our lives will never be the same. The vote took 7 minutes. Grant spent 6 of them trying to save himself. He called the emails incomplete. He called the compensation package standard. He called the layoffs a contingency plan that had never been approved. Then Evelyn placed his signed authorization on the screen. The room changed. Not loudly. Power rarely leaves with a crash. Sometimes it disappears through raised hands. The chairman asked Grant to step outside while the board considered temporary suspension. Grant did not move at first. He stood behind his chair with both palms pressed against the leather, as though gripping it hard enough might keep it his. Security entered. That was when he finally looked at me. This company needs someone who understands how it operates, he said. I held his gaze. It needed someone who understood the people operating it. The first guard touched his elbow. Grant pulled away, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the door under his own power. He passed Lauren without looking at her. 3 nights earlier, she had watched him sit at my table like he owned the room. Now she watched the door close behind him. The chairman waited until the latch clicked. All in favor of immediate suspension pending an independent investigation. Every hand rose. Lauren stared at the table. Her promotion disappeared in the same motion. The board then turned to me. The acquisition agreement remained open between us, my name repeating through the footers, schedules, and signature blocks. But the name was never the point. Responsibility was. I will not approve the transaction as written, I said. One of the bankers shifted in his seat. If approval is withheld, he said, Northstar may not survive the quarter. I know. Then what are you proposing? Evelyn passed out a revised term sheet. 3 conditions. The first protected every Northstar employee from involuntary termination for 12 months. No hidden 30-day window. No 117 names erased to create an executive bonus. The second required an independent audit of Crestline's leadership, acquisition practices, and compensation disclosures. The third created an employee equity pool funded partly from Grant's suspended bonus and partly from the transaction reserve. The engineers, analysts, and support teams who had built the company's value would own a piece of what they helped save. A board member near the windows looked up. This will reduce projected earnings. Yes, I said. For at least 2 quarters. Yes. The banker frowned. Shareholders may object. They can object to smaller short-term gains, I said, or explain why they destroyed a functioning company to protect one man's payout. No one challenged me after that. The revised terms passed 9 votes to 3. The acquisition would continue. The employees would keep their jobs. Grant would lose his chair, and I would serve as interim executive chairman until the audit was complete. Lauren finally spoke. What happens to me? Her voice had lost every trace of the woman who stood beside my suitcase. The chairman glanced at Evelyn, then at the certification Lauren had signed. Your appointment as vice president is withdrawn, he said. You may return to your current position pending review or submit your resignation. Lauren looked at me. She expected anger, maybe even satisfaction. I gave her neither. I am not making that decision, I said. Her eyes tightened. You could. That is why I shouldn't. The words struck harder than punishment. If I had fired her, she could have blamed revenge. If I had destroyed the deal, she could have blamed pride. Instead, I left her standing inside the consequences of her own choices. The chairman signed the revised resolution. Evelyn closed the final binder. Around us, lawyers began collecting documents. Phones buzzed with instructions. The machinery of the company started moving in a new direction. Lauren remained seated. Her hand rested on the acquisition agreement. On the page beneath her fingers, my name appeared 3 times. Patent holder, voting controller, final approving authority. But the only line that mattered was the one I added before signing. No employee termination without cause for 12 months. I wrote my name beneath it. Then I closed the folder. Lauren had believed power meant having the largest title in the room. Grant believed it meant controlling the money. They were both wrong. Power was having the ability to destroy everyone who underestimated you, and choosing to protect the innocent instead. Lauren found me in the hallway after everyone else had left. The boardroom doors closed behind her with a soft click. For the first time that morning, there were no lawyers, no executives, no witnesses. Just us. She stood beneath the white corridor lights, holding the same acquisition agreement she had carried into the meeting. The pages were bent now. Her fingerprints marked the edges. Daniel. I stopped near the elevator. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. I didn't know, she said. I looked at her. She took another step. I didn't know you owned the patents. I didn't know about the trust. I didn't know you were the reason the deal existed. That is not the part that matters. Her face tightened. Then what does? I waited. For years, I had imagined this conversation in different forms. In some versions, I was angry. In others, she apologized, and everything inside me softened. Reality was quieter. You knew I was your husband, I said. That should have been enough. She looked down at the agreement. I was under pressure. So were the 117 people you were willing to erase. I never wanted anyone to lose their job. You signed the plan. Grant told me it was temporary. And you believed him because believing him came with a title. Her eyes filled. The elevator arrived, but I did not move. Lauren wiped one tear before it reached her cheek. I made a mistake. No, I said. You made a series of choices. The hallway seemed to narrow between us. She held the document against her chest as if it could protect her. Can we go home and talk? The word home landed harder than I expected. 3 nights earlier, she had stood inside that house and told me I did not belong there. Now she wanted the door to mean something again. I am not going back. Her breath caught. Daniel, please. I looked at the woman I had once loved enough to make myself smaller for. Part of me still loved her. That was the most difficult truth. Leaving would have been easier if I felt nothing. But love without respect becomes a room with no air. You can stay inside it for years and call the pressure loyalty. Eventually, you have to open the door. I'll have Evelyn send the separation papers, I said. Lauren shook her head. You're divorcing me over one night? I'm divorcing you over all the nights that led to it. The elevator doors began to close. She reached forward, but stopped before touching me. I didn't know you had all of this. I pressed the button to hold the doors. That is exactly the problem. She stared at me. You only saw me after other people printed my name in black ink. I stepped into the elevator. This time, she did not follow. 6 months later, the North Star acquisition was still operating. Not perfectly. Nothing worth saving is ever repaired in one clean movement. But the employees kept their jobs. The audit removed 2 more executives. The engineering team received equity, and the first time their names appeared in a shareholder report, I read every one. Grant faced civil charges for fraudulent disclosures. Lauren resigned before the internal review was finished. I heard she accepted a lower position at a smaller firm in Milwaukee. No executive title. No corner office. Just work. I did not celebrate that. Consequences are not always victories. Sometimes they are simply the truth arriving late. I sold the house. Not because I needed the money. Because every room held a version of us that no longer existed. I bought a smaller place near the lake with old wooden floors and windows that faced east. In the mornings, sunlight crossed the kitchen before I made coffee. The silence there felt different. Not empty. Clean. I remained chairman long enough to stabilize the company, then stepped back again. Before leaving, I created a legal fund for engineers who lost control of their work to people with better suits and louder voices. My father would have understood. On my final day, Evelyn brought me the original acquisition agreement. "You should keep it," she said. I looked at the pages. My name appeared everywhere. Licensor. Controller. Approving authority. Once, I thought those words proved who I was. They did not. I signed one final document that afternoon. The divorce decree. My name appeared at the bottom of that page too. That signature mattered more than the other ones. The $33 million deal saved a company, but walking away saved the man who built it.